it's finally out. We have the Conservative Party of Canada costed budget plan for whatever you want to call it. I just want to point out that I didn't print it in color because I wasn't wasting colored ink on the Conservative Party of Canada. But most of it is a bunch of colored pictures of Pierre Poilievre and his wife and other people. So I'm not quite sure what all that's about. But let's dive in, shall we? So the first thing he starts with is a letter from him to everybody in Canada. It's all about making things cheaper for families because families can't afford 4 more years of a lost liberal decade. It's all the same talking points. He says he's going to cut the liberal deficit by 70%, lower income tax by 15%. That's a lie, by the way. He's offering 15% off the lowest tax bracket of 15%. So it actually ends up being 2.25%. But that 2.25% doesn't come into effect until year 4. So that's just before the next election. He's talking about a 0.025% tax cut each year until the final year. Mark Carney's tax plan actually includes a 1% tax cut like day one, but I digress. So, of course, the next page, he starts talking about axing the carbon tax. And we all know that every country needs to have some form of carbon pricing in order to compete globally, in order to trade fairly with other countries in the G7. But he has no solutions on a substitute for how to do that. He wants to axe the sales tax on all new homes under 1.3 million. How many of you are buying houses that cost 1.3 million? Anybody that can't afford their groceries or their dental care for their children is not buying a house for $1.3 million. But who is? Corporate developers. They're doing what they have been doing in Sault Ste. Marie for the last how many years now? They're buying up vacant properties and they're leaving them there to rot because they're not worth anything and they don't even want to fix them up to rent out to other people. They're also talking about scrapping the capital gains tax and any axe the tax on reinvestment in Canada. So businesses don't pay as many taxes. Shocker. Oh, and don't worry, we're going to offer you a TFSA top-up. So anybody that wants to invest in our country can add to that limit by an extra $5,000. I'm pretty sure if you can't afford groceries, you're not able to put an extra $5,000 into your TFSA. But we're going to increase the threshold for seniors that are working up to $34,000. So now if you're a senior and you're working, we'll allow you to make a little bit more money before we tax you on it. Don't worry. And let's not forget about the plastics ban. Just like Trump, we got to get rid of we got to bring back the plastic straws and the plastic grocery bags because, that's a number one issue right now. So on the next page here, which is page 5, he talks about cutting red tape by 25% and bringing in a 2-for-1 rule. We're going to reduce regulations by 25% within 2 years and ensure going forward that 2 regulations are eliminated for every new one. What does that mean? Any developers that have any kind of regulations regarding maybe, the safety of land or water resources or forests or anything else, anytime you create a regulation around this, he wants to drop 2 other ones to make corporations have an easier time destroying our environment. I don't want to say how many times I've seen lost liberal decade in this document, but I digress. They're standing real tall on this getting rid of Law C-69, which they call the pipeline bill. It's not a pipeline bill. It's basically saying that if you want to create a pipeline or any kind of infrastructure that large, you need to consult with the First Nations. You need to consult with the scientists. You need to consult with the government. You need to consult with the people because you need to talk about what it's going to do to their environment. That's not a no pipeline law. It's just a law making sure that everybody is taken care of. They actually want to stop the emissions cap on oil and gas production. Stop it. So oil and gas producers can create as much pollution as they want and have absolutely no repercussions for that. There's a whole lot of blah, blah, blah in the middle of this, so I'm not going to get into everything. I'm just going to stay to the points that make any sense. Hey, one good thing, though, they're going to make it easier to transport booze across the country by bringing down the provincial borders. Pretty sure Carney's already working on that. But hey, if you want to advertise that you're making it easier to get booze, why not? The Conservatives are usually all over that. They're talking about building the homes on page 9, and it actually says they want to remove the requirement to report the sale of your home to the CRA. You think that just applies to you? You don't think that'll apply to anybody buying a property, that they don't have to mention it to the CRA, that they sold a home and maybe made capital gains on it, or a business and maybe made capital gains on it? Or how about these slumlords that are buying buildings, renovating and reselling for like 3 times the amount and not paying capital gains on that? I don't know. They literally want to, on page 10, identify 15% of federal buildings and lands to sell for housing in livable new neighborhoods within 100 days. They're planning on selling a whole bunch of federal things. We'll get into that in a minute. So now let's get into the stop the crime section. They want to introduce a 3 strikes you're out rule. And we all know how well that went in California when they put that in, because after 2 strikes, people know they're going to jail for the rest of their lives. So they're about to do something real nasty. They want to impose life sentences for fentanyl trafficking, illegal gun trafficking, and human trafficking. So hey, that sounds good on paper, right? Except for the poor guy that was crossing the border who someone threw a bunch of fentanyl in his trunk and he didn't know it was there. And now that guy's getting a life sentence and has no due process in court to talk about it and actually defend himself. He's going to prison for life. Or what about that person that's in the wrong place at the wrong time and ends up at a drug den just going to pick up their daily amount, and all of a sudden that place is raided and that person is in there? They're going to end up going to prison for life. They want to end the tent cities by empowering law enforcement to remove repeat offenders causing a public nuisance so our spaces can be more safe for the people that are living in them. Homeless people do not deserve to be arrested. They deserve help. You don't stick them in jail and forget about them. They want to ensure consecutive sentences for mass murderers. Okay, I get it. Why should somebody be against consecutive sentences for mass murderers? When you look at the statistics, the mass murderers in Canada have never gotten out of jail. They have either died in jail or never been released. It's not a thing. It's not something that's actually happening. They're just making it look like they care about mass murderers, which we have very few of in Canada, by the way. They want to remove house arrest, which is actually way cheaper than incarcerating somebody in prison. If they have a small charge, like, I don't know, maybe selling their buddy a joint on the side of the road, and they get charged, they can be on house arrest, paying for their own lights, their own heat, their own food, their own housing. But no, we're gonna try to put them in jail and have to pay for all that. Oh, and by the way, where are we getting the money to pay for all these new jails? Because I don't see any in the budget anywhere. So this bothers me a little bit. They want to create an anti-hate crime task force to protect all threatened religious and cultural communities, including Canada's Jewish, Muslim, Christian, Sikh, Hindu, and other religious communities. But on the same token, their exact statement is they want to direct CSIS to implement threat reduction measures, including communicating with Jewish communities about anti-Semitic threats, along with Chinese, Sikh, and other Canadian communities targeted by foreign threats. I don't hear any talk about Indigenous threats or residential school denialism or the fact that Palestinians are being murdered in Gaza. Nothing about that. We're just going to stand up for the Jewish communities, the Chinese communities, and the Sikh communities. We're not going to stand up for anybody else, just those people. Now they want to spend a whole bunch of money on the border. They want to hire 2,000 more border agents, which, okay, I get that. New scanners, departure tracking to monitor overstays so they know who's in Canada illegally. New drones and surveillance towers, adding a mix of 120 surveillance towers and 90 land-based truck bed mounted drone systems to secure the border. Expand their mandate to patrol anywhere along the border, not just official crossings. We already know that fentanyl is not the problem. Why does he feel the need to spend this much money on the border between Canada and the United States? Because they want to stop Americans from claiming asylum in Canada. Not to mention they're talking about expanding and speeding up removals for any criminal activity on a visitor permit. Anyone who's here on a visitor visa who breaks our laws will be removed from Canada. But what laws, Pierre? Protesting? That's not a law. So we'll get into healthcare and stuff. They are saying that they're going to preserve existing dental care coverage and honor existing deals with provinces and territories on childcare and pharmacare. But if you haven't applied for it yet, you're not getting it. They want compassionate intervention, allow judges to sentence offenders to mandatory treatment for addiction, and help people struggling with severe addictions. Do you know how expensive it is to put someone through rehab if they don't want to be there? Usually it takes about 5 times before someone actually wants to recover and is able to get better. And they need to do that with love and support, not being forced into treatment. Stay tuned for part 2.